welcome back. So just to sort of set the stage here, what have we been doing? What we've been doing is we've conformed to the requirements of the project, right? We have our egg shape to our character here. We also have been doing a little bit of extra work on the side here, taking our sketch and just really nicely defining it with clean line work. And what that does is basically makes a little coloring book, right? And then you take flat colors and then you fill in your coloring book. Now, the flat colors are what we call our fill layers. They're layers that fill in the lines. So this can sometimes be called a line and fill process. It can also be called a line and flats process. Now, this process is there to give you a couple of things. First, it gives you a base color for your figure. If you've ever looked at like toys, right? One thing you'll know about toys is that if you've got, say, like an action figure, usually there's a particular color plastic that is molded in one particular color, and then what happens is the toy manufacturer paints over that, right? If there's any deviation to that one color. So what we're doing is we're sort of laying down the broad themes of all of the colors for our character. We don't want to get too out of control with our colors. We don't ever really want to use as much as possible straight white or straight black in that fill process. White and black tend to flatten things out and kind of doesn't leave you as an artist with any place to go, right? So you can sort of see that I have this black here. We would perceive it as black, but it's actually kind of a greenish gray. So not only does this sort of match with the rest of the green in my uniform here, it also leaves me someplace to go. I can add highlights and shadows to this and sort of really flesh out that form. Okay, the other thing though that these fill layers do is they provide us with the ability to color things cleanly, right? If you were going to paint a room, say you were going to paint a room green, and you had white trim to your room and you had a white ceiling to your room, one of the things that you would need to do in order to keep the room clean is you would need to tape off the trim and you would need to tape off the ceiling so that if you got any of that green color on the doors or on the ceilings, it would only just hit the tape, and then you could just pull the tape off and then you have a nice clean line, right? So what we have here with our fill layers, if we control click them, we can see we have kind of a little piece of tape around the outside. And what's neat about that piece of tape is we can add as many layers as we want, and no matter which layer we are on, it always falls, anything that we paint on that layer is going to fall within inside that selection. So it sort of makes a stencil for us to follow, right? So instead of doing like weird crisscrosses like we have there, what we're going to do instead is we're going to use those stencil layers to do some nice clean lighting. Again, we're going to be going over lighting in this course. We're not going to worry too much about it today. Don't be afraid to make some mistakes on your lighting. Lighting takes a little while to sort of really understand. But we'll go through a few just general pointers here to get started, and then we'll kind of finish this figure off, and we'll kind of see what he looks like when he's all done. The first thing that we want to do, I'm just going to sort of go with kind of a toy-like appearance for this figure. So I'm going to grab my airbrush. Just remember, an airbrush is a round brush. It's got zero hardness to it. You might have your own idea of how you would like to adjust the spacing on this brush. You might also add transfer. If I grab this with my mouse, you should see, yep, there we go. It just popped in. There's my transfer. Okay, so I'm going to use this to do my lighting and my shadows on my figure. And remember, again, you're going to be doing all of those within this sort of stenciled area here, right? You can also make your own stencils. If you want, you could make another layer, and I don't know, you could just use a marquee tool and just draw whatever shape it is that you want. Maybe you need a hard edge to some of your lit areas here, so you might take your airbrush and draw within just that space. You can see how that would look. And then if you want to add in a pattern or something like that, hearts, right? You can add those in as a stencil as well. Okay. But in this particular case, we're going to keep things pretty simple. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a highlight. Highlight's basically just like if you had a spotlight on the character, where would the light hit? You're going to have to use your imagination a little bit to get the right kind of look. But again, we'll just go ahead and use that airbrush, and we'll size it to about here. Remember that most highlights on things don't really appear on the edges. They appear usually toward the center, because that's kind of where your eye hits the part of that object that you're looking at that's closest to you. That's where your highlights hit. So you really wouldn't want to put a highlight out here. It would imply that you have a light way up here someplace. But if you have a light that's coming in from above the figure, you might have a light that hits somewhere up here, right? Yeah, there we go. And if this arm turns, we should probably turn our light and sort of repeat that light is in existence over there. Right? Up on the neck here, up on the collar. You might just very, very gently put this in. You may not even want to use 100% opacity. You may want to lower the opacity on that. Once you've got your highlights in, we're going to change our layer blending from normal to overlay. You could also maybe use hard light if you wanted. All we're doing with that is we're just changing the contrast between this lit layer and what is below it. Again, this is just one layer. It's just going to be just for this particular lighting. That allows us the ability to change this layer if we don't want it, or go into opacity or fill and adjust how extreme we want this lighting to be. Next, we'll look at shadows. And again, this is just for one particular part. You're going to want to repeat this process for each individual part and make sure that everything matches up. We'll see what that looks like in just a little bit. I just kind of want to go over the process for right now. We're going to set this to overlay. We're going to pick a not black color here, and we're just going to go on the inside and just very lightly kind of eyeball it. At the bottom of our egg here, we might add a little bit more shadow. Shadow is not particularly always black. It simply is the absence of a particular color of light. So if you have a room that's got UV light because you went cosmic bowling or something, you might have a light that's on you, but all of the shadows that are going to be on you are going to be in that sort of brilliant UV purplish color, right? So shadows aren't always black. In this case, we'll just leave it simple and we'll go with a black color. So you would want to repeat this sort of process. And then one other thing that you can do if you want the character to look a little bit more grounded is add what we call an area shadow. And so if I go back to my brush, one thing I can do is just pull this down, this anchor point down, and that'll give me a nice oval shape. If I size that up, I can click right here, and that gives my character a little grounding. If I want it to look even better, I might just Control T, transform, and do something like that. This is not a very well-defined shadow, but it's just something to give your character a little bit of grounding that they might otherwise not have. Okay, so what am I going to do here? I'm going to go ahead and remove these layers because actually I've already added all of this stuff. So if I turn on my stage 3 coloration here, I've got shadows for my face. I've added some additional coloration to get those lights in there. Some highlights for the face and some specularity. Specularity, like this is, again, I'm just taking that brush, that round brush, and what I've done is I've added in just some smaller areas. Specularity is just kind of like a very sharp highlight. Right, there's my arms again. Specularity on my arms. Here's some shadow for the green portion of my figure. Some highlights, some specularity, just to give it a little bit of metallic kind of a look. And I've also added some speckle. If I zoom in here, you can see it a little bit better. How did I do that? It's fairly straightforward. All you would do is you would go ahead and select your green area here and use your airbrush like so. Then all you need to do is set this to dissolve. Put another layer above it, Control E to merge them together. That way that layer effect is off. Then we just turn it on to overlay and we get this sort of neat auto paint kind of a speckle to our figure. All right. Finally, one thing that I would do is go over this again with my line work, but you can also color your line work as well. Remember, your line work is also of itself a stencil. So if you wanted to add some color to it, you could very easily, in another layer, just go right over it with some color and kind of give it a more cartoony, sort of a look. And I have already done that. And if I turn this line off underneath, this is a little bit more of a relaxed look. You can also lower the opacity on some of this color just to give it a little something, still keep it looking cartoony. And then finally, what I've done is I've added a layer of glow over the top of that, and that's fairly easy to do. All you're doing is grabbing your brush. You can leave it as this really strong green. Let's take these anchor points and pull them back out. Set that back to the way that it was before. Let's grab some of this green color and then just lightly do something like this. I know that doesn't look right yet, but if we go into our layer blending, go into normal, set it to screen, what we end up with is a completed Eggbaby character. So try some of this stuff out. Make sure that you're experimenting a little bit. Remember that you can use, create your own little stencil layers. If these layers are not sufficient, go draw something else on the layer above it and use that as a stencil. Experiment and see how stencils work if you're using a gradient brush like this. What does it look like if I select this and I do something, right? How does that affect my brush? Take a look at all of this stuff. All of these tools are really important. They'll give you a little bit more of an advantage. The more you play around, they'll give you a little bit more of an advantage as we move forward to our next figure, which is going to be sort of a figure based on simple shapes. But I hope you've enjoyed this project, and we'll move on to the next one in just a bit.